Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. Today we have one of my favourite deck lists in the Yugioh TCG, and that is Spright Cyber Dragon. Now I did a video on this in Master Duel, but I finally got around to building it in the TCG, and I wanted to show off my list here today. Now it's been quite fun to play, and it's relatively successful, especially with the Spright engine, and honestly I think this is one of the best ways to play Cyber Dragon in this current format. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it. So before we get started, I just want to point out that the deck list will be in Dueling Book below, just so you can see all the cards in one nice layout. But we're going to go through card by card here. So to start off with, we're going to go with our Spright core. So we have 3 Sprites blue. This one's pretty self-explanatory. Of course, you want to be seeing this, especially because we're running a nice level 2 that this can go or special from. And then we also run 3 Spright Jet to search off the blue. Once again, this is just your standard Spright lineup. Then we have 1 red and 1 carrot. You can run more carrots or reds if you want. There are a couple of flex spots in this deck, but I found that these two, or one of each, has been sufficient, since generally a game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Only lasts a couple of turns, and you most of the time are going to be getting these out on turn 1 anyway. For the Spright spells, we obviously run 2 starters since it was recently limited, and then or semi-limited, and then we have a Spright Smashers that you can search if you really don't need the starter. Not much to say about this, nothing too crazy with the Spright core, pretty much just all the generic stuff. Next, we also run a small Nimble package. So we run 2 Nimble Angler and 3 Beaver. You can send this with the Spright Sprint to special the Beavers, and that's pretty much it. There is a fun play you can do with the Angler, which I'll show shortly after we go into the Cyber Dragon core, which we'll be doing now. So the reason you want to run Cyber Dragon Spright is these boys right here, the Cyber Dragon cores. You see, level 2 alert. These are level 2, so you can go into your Spright plays after summoning or normal summoning the core. That's pretty much it, but it also does let you search some of the spells. So we'll go through those quickly now. We run 3 Cyber Emergency to search out your other cyber cards. You also run a Cyber Repair Plant to search for light machines, which we'll show off in a moment. A Cyber Rev system, since it does let you combo off with the core, and the core alone lets you go into Sprint and Gigantic. And a Cybernetic Overflow for another disruption in case you really don't need any of these searches. For the rest of the Cyber Dragon package, we run 2 Galaxy Soldiers. This will let us go into Nova and Infinity. Alongside this, we run a single hers, since this is a full combo into Infinity with the Galaxy Soldier. For that exact reason, we run a singular Cyber Dragon as well. So, for example, you can draw it into a Galaxy Soldier, and then you can search the hers with one of these guys, pitch that, grab the Cyber Dragon, and go from there. We also run one of the Machine Kaiju, so this could be very useful in some matchups, and you can search it off Cyber Repair Plant. And lastly, we run a Cyber Dragon Nashter. Not only can this grab a Cyber Dragon from grave, which is quite rare, but the effect is you discard any monster to special summon it, and you can actually discard the Nimble Angler to get its effect, which is probably one of the most fun plays in this deck. It does really catch people off guard when you play it, and it is a great extender if and changes this Nimble Angler from a brick in your hand to actually something quite useful. So now we'll be going into our generic stuff. We have 3 Ash Blossom. This is just because Ash Blossom is quite nice, and that's pretty much it. We like running Ash Blossom, but this is seriously a flex spot for any hand trap that you might feel is better in the meta. Maybe even a Droll if you're facing some decks that completely lose to that. We'd also run 3 Effect Veilers. Now, the reason we run these Effect Veilers is because they are light. You can technically discard an Effect Veiler to special summon a Galaxy Soldier. Whilst that does come up quite rarely, the fact that it does happen or can happen, as well as it being just a generic useful hand trap, is worth running in my opinion. And to stop our opponent's hand traps, we have 2 Triple Tactics Talent. Now, this can be replaced with Thrust, but Talent is also brilliant as well. Being able to steal, or sometimes even draw if you have a really bricky hand, is super useful. I rarely use the hand rip since this deck really does need the consistency, but the option's always there. And we also run a Called By, just because Ash really does hurt this deck if you draw some certain hands. Now we'll run through the extra deck, then the side deck, and then I'll show off a couple of combos, just so you get the gist of why Cyber Dragon is worth running in Spright. So one of the big reasons Cyber Dragon is worth running is the following. So we've got two Chimera Tech Mega Fleet Dragons. If you don't know this card, you use a Cyber Dragon monster plus one monster in the extra monster zone, which can be your opponent's monster as well. So for example, if they end on a big boy in the extra monster zone, you can normal summon core, go to your Sprite plays, make sure you don't lock yourself to twos, and then special this guy out, removing contact fusing the link monster there. Is especially good against kind of math mech, where sometimes they end on the the link 5 attribute dragon, I forget what it's called, but it's good against any deck that has any single kind of link monster. Contact fusing is so powerful. And on that note, we also run one singular Fortress Dragon. This is in case you're running against a machine deck. It's not very likely, but sometimes it happens, and it can make or break the game against those there. The rest of our Cyber Dragon core, we have an Infinity, a Nova, and a Cydra. Now these will be summoned off your Galaxy Soldiers pretty much, and you can, on the best hand, you can end with a full Sprite board plus Infinity, which is super nice, and just getting Infinity out on its own is fine. Cydra is a bit of a backup plan. If you can't get into your Sprite plays, then I guess you can end on Cydra Pass, but it's very much a backup plan. You won't be going into this too often. Now going into our Sprite side of the extra deck, we have two Gigantics. Pretty obvious that those will be in there. Of course, you want to be careful because this locks you into twos. So if you want to do any of your Contact Fuse Cyber Dragon plays, go into this afterwards or activate the effect afterwards so that you can still get away with that. And of course, a Sprite Sprint. This is for your Nimble package, and that's about it really. The bounce effect is super useful, and because Infinity can attach materials, you technically have that all the time while that's alive, but yeah, that's a very fringe play. But we also have a Cat Shark, which lets us OTK with the Gigantic Sprite and sometimes the Infinity as well, since it doubles an XYZ's attack. So that's our kind of OTK potential there, since we don't run a Gamma Burst. And lastly, for our generic extra deck cards, we run an Almirage. This is to get your Cyber Dragons into the grave if you summon them on the field. So you can go to core, use your Sprite plays, link it off for Almirage, and then kind of go from there. We also run an IP Masquerena, since it's pretty much mandatory in Sprite. And of course, a Unicorn to go into from the IP. Along those lines, we also run a White Woman Jump Scare, aka Underworld Goddess, again for the IP plays. Lastly, for the generics, we have Zeus, just because if you really have a tough board, or you're playing against like Labyrinth, back row heavy deck, or something like that, you can elect not to use the Gigantic Sprite effect, attack, and then go into Zeus and wipe their board. So that's it for the main deck. We'll be popping into the side deck now. This side deck is very negotiable. It depends what you're running into at your locals, and I'll chuck in a few options that I have tried to run and have had seen some success, but for now I've settled on this side deck here. So to start off with, we have 3 Nibiru. This is great against a multitude of decks. I mainly put it in there for Sun Avalon and the Kashtira, just because they cause us a lot of trouble, but it's good against rogue strategies as well. Just a generically good card. And then we run some back row hate, so we run 2 Lightning Storms and a Harpy's Feather Duster. Now these are going second cards here, because with this deck, whilst it is Cyber Dragon, you still want to be going first, since you can set up your entire Sprite board plus Infinity, but the Cyber Dragon stuff does give it a great advantage going second as well, but this just gives it a little bit more edge going second. Speaking of going second, we have 3 evenly matched as well. while Cyber Dragon wouldn't usually run this if you're playing an OTK variant, since this can really go for the grind game, you don't really care if you can OTK your opponent on the second turn, since you can just generate a bunch of advantage after activating Evenly Matched. And you can tell there's a lot of go second cards here, but we also have 3 Droll and Lockbird in the side. Especially in this format, this is an amazing card, but in general it will always be pretty good. This is probably my only side deck card that I would elect never to take out, because it's just so powerful that when you activate it and resolve, it's pretty fantastic. And for our singular going first side deck, we have Anti-Spell Fragrance. Now, this is mainly just because Runic players, like, if you still set up your board, yes, you can carrot a fountain, but that requires getting fully set up. And honestly, against a lot of decks, this is just a shutdown, especially the ones at my locals, so that's why I run it in there. It's negotiable, but I highly recommend you keep it in, since whilst it does hurt you a little bit, it doesn't hurt you nearly as much as it will hurt the opponents. So that's it for the deck list. I'm just going to do a little shuffle here, and then we can do a sample hand and show you what I'll do from that hand, so you can get a gist of why Cyber Dragon is worth running in Spright. As I said earlier, it's worth noting that this is a going first build, but Cyber Dragons in this deck do give you a bit of an edge going second as well, so you can really do both, but if you have the option, you want to be going first. Right. Let's say we're going first here. We draw Core, Smashers, Emergency, Tactics, Nashta. We can work with this. So we'll start with the Cyber Dragon Core, activating its effect to search. Since we already have a Cyber Emergency, we'll go for the, where is it? The Rev System. Rev System turns Core into a 1-card Sprint, as you'll see in a second. So let's link this guy off into our Mirage, sending him to the grave. We can then activate Rev System to bring back the Core. And guess what? We have a level 2 and another monster, so we can go into Sprint. We'll activate Sprint to send the Nimble Angler to the grave, specialing to Nimble Beavers. Now this is a pretty generic sprite line here. We'll go into Gigantic. Obviously we'll put that in the zone that Sprint isn't pointing to. And if you really wanted to bait the Ash on the core there, we can start with Cyber Emergency. That's worth noting, especially if you have Tactics in hand. And then from here, we can go into our generic sprite line of activating Gigantic, going into Blue, going into Jet, etc., etc. Grab the starter. And yeah, that's just how you can see that Cyber Dragon Core is a 1-card sprite board builder. Since you can search the rev system, you can just bring it back and go straight into Sprint, and then do all of this lovely stuff. So here I'll just quickly show off what you need to see to get the Cyber Dragon Infinity line going. So the only 2 cards you really need are Galaxy Soldier and a Cyber Dragon Hers. And so basically you need to see a Galaxy Soldier and any way to search the Hers. So I've got a little example hand here that I'll show off to you now. So here's a little bit of a dream hand that I've cooked up here, kind of a custom hand. So with this you can see that we have the core and the soldier. So we're going to start with the normal summon, the Cyber Dragon core. This will allow us to get or search for a Cyber Emergency, which will let us search for the Hers. Alternatively, if we've drawn the Hers and not the Galaxy Soldier, we can get Repair Plant instead and use that. But in this example, we'll activate Cyber Emergency and grab the Hers. So now that we've got the hers here, we can start our infinity line. It's worth noting that if the core does get ashed, if we have any of our sprite cards, we can simply special summon it and go into our sprite line instead. In the best case scenario, you can actually do both, so you can use your Cyber Dragon Infinity and the sprite line at the same time. That's what you want to see in the best case scenario, but worst case, we still have our sprite to fall back on. So now we'll go into our common Infinity line. We'll activate Galaxy Soldier, discarding the hers to special summon the Galaxy Soldier. We'll go Chainlink 1 Soldier, Chainlink 2 hers, which allows us to add a Cyber Dragon off the hers effect and a Galaxy Soldier off the Galaxy Soldier effect. Now we'll once again activate Galaxy Soldier, discarding the Cyber Dragon to special summon him. And now that that's done, we have 2 level 5 machines, so we can go into Nova. Now it's worth noting that this is 4 summons, so you can technically extend by detaching a Galaxy Soldier to special summon a Cyber Dragon, but this does put you in Nibiru range, so if you're scared of Nibiru, go straight into Infinity. But what this allows with the special summon of the Cyber Dragon is using these 2 monsters to go into our Sprint as well, so that we can go into our Sprite plays, as well as getting our Infinity out on the board. And of course you can use the Sprint to do all your Sprite shenanigans by pitching your Nimble Angler, etc, etc. But this is just an example of how you'd usually get Infinity out on the field and also continue your Sprite line with that. So that's how you utilize the Cyber Dragon engine and the Sprite engine at the same time. As you saw there, that's probably one of the best hands you could ever see, but that does happen quite frequently, and worst case you can go into one of the engines and it usually does the job. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about the deck list, let me know in the comments because I love this deck and I'd love to talk about it. As I said earlier, if you want a full guide on how to play this deck, let me know because I'll happily do it. If you've made it this far in the video, please do feel free to hit subscribe. New Yu-Gi-Oh videos each week, and as always, happy dueling. You were dealt a bad